Hi, this is Olivia and Elyse, and today we're going to talk about the National Organization for Women.
So this quote is by Shirley Chisholm. It says, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair, which encompasses a lot that the National Organization for Women stands for.
So we're going to start off with a little bit of talk about the foundation of the National Women's Organization, and particularly why it was founded and when it was founded. The National Organization for Women kind of piggybacked off the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act. There were feminists that lobbied for an additional amendment in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that would prohibit the discrimination in employment. And the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that was formed under President Johnson to implement Title IX failed. And there were a lot of women who were very upset about this and knew that they needed another law and another commission to back women up and to ensure that there was no segregation or discrimination on the basis of sex. So there was a national conference of commissions on the status of women where they wanted to demand that they make it legal to end sex discrimination in employment. A group of women rallied behind this idea, and that group of women is what we now look to as the founders of NOW.
So probably one of the most prominent founders of NOW are Betty Friedan. She's the author of the Feminine Mystique, and she was NOW's first president. She also drafted the purpose statement for NOW, which we'll look at in a second. Some other notable people are Aileen Hernandez, who was the first VP, Polly Murray, who is the author of many of the documents that NOW releases, and Mariel Fox, who wrote the first press release for the National Organization for Women and is the chair for their first public relations task force.
So when these women all got together, they drafted what is now called as the NOW's purpose statement. And that is so crucial when we're talking about this because it is what they use today. And that is the purpose of NOW is to take action to bring women into full participation in the mainstream of American society now, exercising all the privileges and responsibilities thereof in truly equal partnership with men.
So some of the goals for the National Organization for Women are reproductive rights and justice, which it's important to note that this extends far beyond just abortion. It talks about STI screenings, comprehensive sexual education, and such things. Also ending violence against women, domestically and outside of the home, economic justice, closing the gender wage gap, LGBTQ plus rights, racial justice, and the Constitutional Equality Amendment.
And you can't really talk about the National Organization without talking about the ERA, because the ERA was something that the National Organization for Women really lobbied for and really supported. And that is an amendment that was proposed to guarantee equal rights for all Americans, regardless of sex. It's also important to highlight that this really includes the LGBTQ community. This is not exclusive to a male-female binary. It was introduced in 1923 by Alice Paul. It was sent to the states for ratification in 1972, and it's important to note that there were 3 sections to the ERA, and you would think that it would be pretty easy to get just 3 sections across to all 50 states, but as we will see in the next slide, there are many states that have failed to ratify the ERA, and we will talk about why.
So as you can see on this slide, these are the states that have not ratified the ERA yet. The ERA has been around, like Elyse said, since 1972, and all of the leaders of these states have failed to recognize the importance of the ERA or have their own personal reasons for not ratifying the ERA in general. Some of these reasons that these states have not ratified the ERA, a lot of it has to do with the work of the Eagle Forum, which is an organization that was founded by Phyllis Schlafly in the 70s when the ERA was proposed. This organization does a lot to reject the ideas of feminists and gay marriage and racial equality. It's a very conservative group, and one of their main focuses is to stop the ERA. So Phyllis Schlafly really believed that the ERA was about abortion, which is something that conservatives are generally very against, and she coined the idea that if the ERA was passed, then abortion would be a lot more accessible and that babies would be dying a lot more consistently. A lot of people also believe that the 14th Amendment offers enough protection and that there's actually no need for the Equal Rights Amendment and that it should not be added into the U.S. Constitution. However, those who do support the ERA still demand it for its ratification, and there are many reasons why. So some of the most important being that the U.S. Constitution only ensures equality between the sexes when it comes to voting. There's no definite parts of the Constitution that ensure that men and women will be treated equally, which is something that the National Organization for Women really does emphasize. Also, in Supreme Court rulings, it'll be a lot more consistent if the ERA is ratified. It'll be more clear on how judges interpret cases of discrimination on the basis of sex, which is very important because it makes it more consistent for women and men who are suing or have cases that have to do with discrimination. Also, the U.S. is one of 6 countries out of 186 that has not ratified CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women that was proposed by the United Nations. The 6 countries that are next to it are definitely not countries that are known for their equal treatment of women, and this is something that the ERA and NOW really highlight as big reasons why the ERA needs to be passed and why America needs this.
So the NOW's work may be very historical and have a lot of historical relevance, but it's definitely not dying down. They are still very active. One of their things that they are currently focusing on is the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. And I'm sure a lot of you have some ideas why, but they actually publicly denounced her and claimed that her originalist interpretation of the law fails to include different races, sexual orientation, and women. And considering that the law is written to benefit the white heterosexual male from the start, you really do need a justice that's going to allow for some wiggle room and some interpretation of the law. And her originalist interpretation is going to be very narrow-minded in terms of what the NOW is trying to accomplish, which is going to be somewhat regressive in terms of like what they are thinking about this. She has publicly strongly voiced her opinions against abortion, and that is a personal opinion of hers, but there is a fear that that will protrude into the Supreme Court and potentially overturn Roe v. Wade, which would be absolutely detrimental and, again, regressive for the work that the National Organization for Women has done. Additionally, they have not supported the Trump administration, and they have criticized the Trump administration for funding cuts to Planned Parenthood, Medicaid, and Title IX, and the institution of a gag rule that prohibited healthcare providers who receive Title IX funding from discussing healthcare options with patients, as well as people being able to deny healthcare and abortion and screening and sexual education on the basis of religion. The Trump administration also attempted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which could keep about 4 million people from access to not only abortion, but affordable birth control, STI testing, cancer screening, and so much more. It is also important to mention that the NOW has really focused on what's happening at the U.S. border right now, which has fallen a little bit behind in terms of the news, and it's definitely overshadowed by COVID and a lot more dire issues. But there are 545 children with missing migrant parents at the U.S. borders right now, and the NOW argues that these children are in inhumane conditions and as well as potentially emotionally traumatized from being stripped from their parents, and for being in inhumane conditions. So they have decided to create a Bill of Rights for people housed in immigration detention prisons, which we have listed right here. It is a little bit hard to read, but it's pretty cool that they've done this. And this applies to not only what's happening right now, but this will apply to all other border disputes in the future and will provide people there with human rights and with the care that they deserve as people, which I think is pretty cool.
So COVID-19, which is a pretty new issue, has actually had a big impact on women, and the National Organization for Women has been very concerned with this. So some of the consequences that NOW is focusing on of COVID-19 are potential isolation with abusers. This can lead to unwanted pregnancies, but unwanted pregnancies is another consequence. There's a lot less access and knowledge about contraception during these times of stress, and it really does make for a lot more unwanted pregnancies. Connecting back to the potential isolation with abusers, this also has caused a spike in domestic violence, whether it's a parent or a relative or a partner or a marriage. There has been a spike in domestic violence. And it's been very detrimental for women who have been isolated with these people and can't get the comprehensive help that they need. Also, caregivers, especially women who are working and have their kids at home because they're not going to daycare or school, have a brunt of the work that is in the house. They have to now provide 3 meals every single day for their kids. They have to entertain their kids. They have to make sure their kids are safe and healthy. And including a lot of women also have to cook and clean, which has been very difficult, not only for women's mental health, but it's also just been very stressful in general. And a lot of companies and places of work are unable to recognize that this is a very serious issue, and they're not giving any wiggle room for these women that need a little bit of a break, since right now these are such stressful times. So NOW has responded to this because obviously this is a very relevant issue today. So they're continuing to advocate for the Violence Against Women Act. This will help address this sexual violence that is a lot more prominent, especially since women are being stuck with their abusers, and there's a lot more domestic violence. It also allows it helps to destructuralize the systems that allow for violence to occur, and people who are not getting penalized as they should for these terrible things that they are doing.
It also should be noted that this Violence Against Women Act has been drafted before, but it is currently sitting in the Senate graveyard because COVID-19 and all those measures have taken the forefront. And it is with hopefully the new administration that the NOW will continue to lobby for this, and hopefully it will be brought up again and hopefully passed, as this is a very serious thing that needs to be addressed right now in the face of COVID, but it has taken a backseat, unfortunately. And most certainly, NOW's work is not done. It has a plan for 2060. They want, like, the top 4 quotes that you see here, all those things they want to be institutionalized and normalized in America. So feminism is a movement for everybody. Political correctness is simply a means of just being respectful. They want to focus on intersectionality. They demand that Joe Biden renounce his support for the Hyde Amendment. They want to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment in all states, and very importantly, protect Roe v. Wade from the Supreme Court and Amy Coney Barrett. There are a lot of threats to that. And I guess with the Trump administration, all the threats to the work of the NOW is kind of also regressively working to go back to the work that they had installed before, and trying to undo all of Trump's doings, but also trying to make progress at the same time. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how the NOW works going forward as we kind of go through this yo-yo politic era of undoing the past, but also trying to do the future at the same time.
So the NOW is not without its criticisms and also not without its setbacks. There's a lot of people who are far right conservatives who are very opposed to some of these strides that the NOW is trying to take for women, including the Violence Against Women Act, the ERA, and the fact that that hasn't been ratified yet, the Fair Pensions Act, the Paycheck Fairness Act, Title IX, and documents such as this that could really be very, very beneficial to women. Blocking the ratification of the United Nations CEDAW, another very important thing that is very surprising for America, but is unfortunately the reality for the United States today because of these very, very conservative people. also with this, Tony Van Pelt, who was the previous president of the NOW, was people said that she was creating a very toxic environment and being very discriminatory towards people of color and people of other sexualities who were working for NOW, which goes against everything that NOW stands for and was very detrimental to the legitimacy of the organization in itself. She has since been fired or been laid off, and they have a new president that is making great strides for women. But it also, that contributed to the loss of momentum, and also just the fact that the NOW is still dealing with the things that they were dealing 50 years ago, the ratification of the ERA, protecting abortion for women, and so on and so forth. They're dealing with these same issues, and it gets very, very redundant, and it's exhausting for not only us as women, but also for the National Organization for Women. So the momentum and the initial excitement of NOW has been lost, though the fire is not completely out, and there's still a lot of potential and a lot of work that NOW can do to help American politics.
So I guess the most important question that we are trying to aim for today is, how has the national organization really changed and shaped American politics? And I would say, as a woman, there are a lot of things in like societal structures that can't necessarily be combated, but there are definitely attitudes that can be changed. And I think that NOW has paved the way for a lot of feminist attitudes, and especially with the Me Too movement and the women's marches that have been going on and gaining traction across the whole country. It's been really cool to see attitudes of power and change come from women, and that wouldn't have been possible without the help of the National Organization for Women and all the things that they have done, all the work that they have put in. They have really been the backbone of America and women in America, and they have also aided the economy too. We can't really talk about the NOW without recognizing the work that they have put in for women to participate in the workforce and therefore participate in the economy. And there are still so many things that need to be addressed, namely like maternity leave and maternity leave legislation. It's important to note that the U.S. as a federal institution does not offer paid leave for maternity. It's up to the employer, which is very different to a lot of the countries that we are with in terms of our grouping of like central countries and peripheral countries and semi-peripheral countries, which is like very interesting to consider. But I think that the National Organization for Women has just challenged the heteronormative U.S. system that it has been based off of.
I also think it's also very important to note that the National Organization has really helped women keep men accountable for the things that they do in order to degrade women and in order for men to be have this idea of being more powerful than women. A lot of people are really starting to hold men accountable for saying sexist things, for, committing sexual assault and sexual harassment, and for being, for not contributing good things to women in our society. Men are finally starting to be held accountable for this, and it's really bringing the power back to women, which in turn empowers women to be a part of the economy and empowers women to be part of politics, and in general just gets women in America more active and more vocal with the things they've gone through, and how we can apply it to make the United States a better place to live.
And in conclusion, we can really look at America as a society and see a lot of very progressive things when it comes to discrimination on the basis of sex. But a lot of where we are today cannot be talked about without a lot of recognition and thanks towards the National Organization for Women.